Good evening, this is the Oscar expert here with Brother Bro, and it's time to review She Said. This movie is directed by Maria Schrader, and it is about the two New York Times reporters who uncovered the Harvey Weinstein story, which set off pretty much the entire Me Too movement. Some people were wondering, is this going to be like Bombshell? Is this going to be like Spotlight or whatever? This movie is definitely more like Spotlight in that it's just a very straightforward journalism movie. And I think that if you're worried that this is going to be some sensationalized Hollywood, over-dramatized type of story, you should put those fears aside because this movie really is just faithful to how the story unfolded, and it's often content with the conversations just being kind of matter-of-fact and dry and to the point. In terms of telling true stories, there's like a spectrum of how much you want to like amp up the drama, and on one end you have Aaron Sorkin movies like The Trial of Chicago 7, where you like literally have some things that didn't happen, and you try to stay true to like the emotion and the ideas in there, but you really fabricate a lot of the story to make it more of like a blockbuster roller coaster type of experience. And then this is really on the opposite end. It really just is these reporters like slowly doing this story, and then they talk to this person, and then they talk to this person, and they talk to these people, and you know, it plays out almost kind of the way you'd expect for this story. And I think that that was a good choice because I think there are a lot of ways that could go wrong if you try to sensationalize this story. And I appreciate that this just wants to be more straightforward and honest about how it went down. But at the same time, it did at times feel a little too dry for me.
I think there was something really valuable that I got from this movie, and that is you see the ways in which Harvey Weinstein is able to silence people legally. So you see how the system operates, and you also get to see how many gatekeepers there are and like how many barriers they're facing legally. So you can see how like this whole system was put into place very strategically to keep people from saying something, and why it was so difficult for anybody to speak up and for anyone to feel like their voice would be valued or it would be safe to do so.
And how hard it was for these two journalists to like even get any of this information, despite the fact that so many people in Hollywood know about his behaviors.
Yeah, I guess that's like a good reason.
I think it was mostly like pretty well justified. But in terms of the characters in the movie, I think this is where they could have gone into more creative liberties. Like, I would say that these two main characters, played by Zoe Kazan and Carey Mulligan, they don't really have arcs. They almost are presented having like the same personality with very small differences. And there's not really a sort of dynamic between the two of them that's fun to watch or that develops very much.
They're very immersed in their work. And
Yeah.
their identity is sort of like the work that they're doing to further this cause. And of course, they are heroes. Like, you don't need to make them like more grounded or more
or movie character-y. Like, I get the intention. This might have just been very honest. Like, they just might have been people who cared about the situation because it was important to them, and they were just doing their job as best as they could. But I do think that, you know, as a movie, maybe there is something a little bit lacking there. I do like when the characters feel more personally involved, and you get sort of hints that there are some personal conflicts going on. Like, Carey Mulligan just had a child and is dealing with like some postpartum depression.
That's really it.
Yeah, but then that kind of goes away. There's one moment where Zoe Kazan is talking to her daughter, and she's like, everyone has a secret. And her daughter's like, do you have a secret? And she's like, and it seems like it's like, what are we going to find out? But there's nothing. There's nothing.
I mean, I just like in general when the sort of purpose of the movie is tied back into the main character somehow, or like the person who's actually going through the journey. This is just doesn't really try to do that. But again, like these are real people, like they're alive. Maybe it was just trying to be honest. It wasn't trying to like create somebody out of them.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, I can understand the intention and I do respect it. But even when you compare it to movies like The Post and Spotlight, and I wouldn't necessarily say it's like better or worse than The Post, but those movies, I think the journalists had more difficult questions with like how they approach their work that these journalists were grappling with. And here it's somewhat conflicting in some moments. There's a really good moment where Zoe Kazan's trying to find this woman to talk to, and she talks to her husband, and it turns out he didn't even know. Like, that's an interesting moment.
Yeah, so there's actually a lot of interesting moments. And I feel like the more you talk about the protagonists and the fact that they're trying to tell a story, like, the more boring the movie sounds. But really what was interesting is the interviews and the people that they meet in pursuit of writing this piece on Harvey Weinstein.
Oftentimes how invested I am in this movie just depends on who's across the table from one of these two main characters. And it's kind of a revolving door of different people. And some of them really have like these standout moments. And this is where I think the ensemble is really, really strong. I actually think Zoe Kazan, Carey Mulligan, they're very good.
I don't think it's their best performances for either of them, because they're going to be better in like another movie where they can sort of do more. But the performances that really shine are often one-sceners. So Samantha Morton has like one scene where she is phenomenal, similar to The Whale, where she has like 10 minutes of screen time and she just kind of steals the movie there. And then Jennifer Ehle, I think, is the standout for me. She has a couple of scenes and she is magnetic.
Yeah, I thought that these two were probably my favorite performances in here. The movie was willing at times to shift the perspective to these people. Sometimes like there's a couple scenes where we're just watching Jennifer Ehle like with her kids and then she picks up a phone. So it's like, okay, we're not actually sticking strictly to the rule that we have to stay beside these two main reporters. I think since those characters were so interesting, maybe I would have liked the movie to do a little more with that or explore them even more. Like I feel like, you know, Jennifer Ehle was almost one more scene away from perhaps like an Oscar nomination here.
Yeah, I agree. I would have liked to see just more screen time from those performers because they were the best part of the movie. Like one of the whole movie was composed of these great parts.
I also want to mention a couple other brief performances. Andre Braugher was really great. And he's like the person in the office who has handled Harvey Weinstein before. And he's like, I know what to do with Harvey. And he just like kind of tells him off in like a very dry, straightforward way. And it's like very satisfying. I tried really hard to find who this person was on IMDb and I could not find it for some reason. But the guy who played Harvey's lawyer, I thought that was a great little performance in here where like, you know, that he knows that he's being like a lawyer who has more to say and just like can't say it. I don't know. There's just like something that actor like did really well in there.
Yeah, there's a ton of great performances in here. Again, often one-sceners.
There's definitely nothing to write home about with this movie visually. On a technical level, like the editing is fine. I think it's a little rough actually in like the opening montage in the beginning. It just feels kind of random.
There's so many locations in this movie and I think that helps it be like a little more visually interesting.
The score from Nicholas Britell is pretty good. Lots of cascading pianos and strings. There are some moments where the score is very, very prominent, and when it's being used as more of an underscore, it definitely does the job. The embargo's not up on this movie, so I honestly can't like tell you how other people are reacting and if it'll get picture or anything yet, but my impression is that a lot of the reactions to this are going to be like in the 7 to 8 range. It's not going to be polarizing. It's easy to appreciate. The story is powerful. The end is actually really nice. And so that will leave people on like a pretty high note.
The performances are good and the writing is good.
Yeah.
And that's always important. I think it's a little bit hard to be passionate about this movie.
I feel like it's a hard movie to make your top 10 is kind of how I would put it. And so if it gets Best Picture, I think it would be a matter of just like subject matter, cast, like the type of movie that it is, and people just like getting in line and accepting it and be like, sure, why not? And it just like happens.
It could just come out of the embargo and seem like it's really high, and then for it to just kind of go like this, and just the steam overall doesn't feel like it can propel it that far.
I mean, people don't care that much about The Post, but
right.
The Post got nominated for Best Picture.
Right, but they dropped really late in the year too. Like, the earlier in the year this one drops, it's like the worse it is.
It's coming out in November. I do wonder how many people will rush out to theaters to see the movie about the New York Times journalist uncovering the Harvey Weinstein scandal. Are people like, that's a little heavy for me, like that's not why I go to the movies. I think there are, you know, a lot of people who may think that, or there might be a lot of interest for the story because everybody knows it. But it might be the kind of movie where people say, I'll wait till streaming. So I can't predict the box office for this movie or how that could affect the awards buzz or anything like that. Obviously, adapted screenplay, I think that will happen no matter what. And I even heard some people talking after this movie ended about whether or not it could win. If it was in picture, I don't know how it would be like Sarah Polley. I think that's kind of compelling to give Sarah Polley the Oscar. And Women Talking is much more stylized dialogue.
Is this one a writer-director?
It is not. It's not.
Yeah, I think Women Talking is still going to walk away with screenplay. I'm not sure why people are dismissing that. Then what? You have Carey Mulligan. She could go supporting, even though that's category fraud. That's blatant category fraud.
I need to clarify something to people. Zoe Kazan and Carey Mulligan are equally leads. It is split. There's no protagonist. There's no main perspective. Like, they are basically playing like the same person doing different things.
I felt like Carey Mulligan was slightly more of a lead because she had just a little bit more of that like emotional thing going on. They could just throw everyone in supporting and it just would not make sense. Like, it wouldn't make sense.
Well, I think what they're going to do, and I think this is possibly on the way to being like confirmed from what I've heard, is Carey Mulligan goes supporting, just because honestly, if I were the studio, I would say, yeah, this movie does need an acting nomination if we're trying to get picture. And the only way you can get an acting nomination for this movie is if you put Carey Mulligan in supporting. I don't think that either of them could get nominated in lead, and I don't know if Zoe Kazan would get nominated in supporting. I think that if you put Carey Mulligan there and the movie gets picture, it does go along with it, I think.
I do feel like, again, Jennifer Eel would have been a great supporting nomination. Maybe if she had one more scene, I would believe she could get there, but I just don't quite believe that.
Not if Carey Mulligan.
And it definitely feels like they're throwing that away when they put Carey Mulligan in there. Even though it seems like, okay, someone in an Oscar bait movie who is the lead is going supporting, that should be a shoo-in. I'm not so sure, because again, the performance itself is hard to feel like really passionate about voting for it.
It's a little weird though, because Carey Mulligan does have a lot of screen time. She does, have some of those more emotional scenes, but overall I think her character, didn't leave such an impact on me. Like, I personally wouldn't be very compelled to vote for her. Even
that's the thing.
In supporting.
Is she in your top 5?
But here's the thing. If the movie got picture, I think she would get in. Like, I think she just would. I think it just is the thing that would happen. She coattails. She goes along with it. She's Carey Mulligan.
I think with 10 slots, this could maybe get in as a 9 or 10 and just get screenplay.
But here's the other thing. People are going to start, and this is true, people are going to start saying that Carey Mulligan's going to win for this. I swear to God, she's going to shoot up.
People are going to say that.
People are going to say that she's going to win for it. Even that is like weird to me, especially because of the category fraud. And at the same time, not necessarily impossible in my mind. Not necessarily impossible.
Yikes,
Even though I'm not even like sure what's going on, I could see people gathering around that because there's no real clear front runner.
I don't really see it.
But it also, it doesn't register as like an Oscar-winning performance. No. And I think Carey Mulligan has been better in her other nominations.
Because people still have to feel good and passionate about voting for you, and I just don't know if that's there. I don't know.
I mean, she was really good. Like, it's weird. It's like I don't have any complaints about. Like,
no,
it's
no. It's not. There's nothing to complain about. It's just that whenever she's across the table from another actor who has a more interesting story and more interesting lines to deliver, they're the more compelling one. Like, that's the thing for me.
Yeah, and a lot of it's just like
it's not like she brought a character to life in like a new way, because the movie just didn't require it.
Other nominations, like, I'd be surprised if this got any goddamn text at all, other than maybe score, because it's Nicholas Britell and it does have some of those showier moments. I wouldn't rush to put it in my 5, but it's it's definitely a possibility. You're really gonna have to wait for the next Oscar predictions update, because I don't have any reviews in front of me for this movie right now.
I really think what people are gonna do is throw it up and say, oh my God, that's in. Like, this is so easy to make room for in my 10. But I don't know if in the end of the day, people are gonna vote for this thing.
What if it's like Loving?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Loving was a movie where people were rarely going above like 8 out of 10, and it was kind of like very straightforward. It was well acted.
People were like, "Oh, well, this is an Oscar movie."
Yeah, people just decided it, and then it turns out the passion wasn't quite there. Like, maybe that's this movie.
Show me the people who say this is great, and then maybe I'll believe you.
We'll have to find them. I think overall the movie is kind of doing two things at once. It's about how journalists are heroic in what they do and how important that is, and it's also about like sexual assault in the entertainment industry. Like, there's a lot of topics that it does cover well, and it does justice to those topics, and there's certainly a narrative for this as a Best Picture nominee, like, for sure.
Yeah, but again, we're already aware of this. This is so contemporary that it feels like this happened yesterday. We just might be like, okay, we know. Really sharp writing and really good ensemble. I would say maybe it's a contender for SAG Ensemble.
It could be. I would give this movie a pretty solid 7 out of 10. There were a couple of moments where it felt like a little stirring and it was like a little bit getting to me, but it was never like a huge fucking knockout gut punching. It didn't really try to be that.
I would say I'm like a 7 or an 8, but I might go down to a 7 because I just feel like in the end, this is going to be a little bit of a forgettable movie for me.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing.
What did she say to you?